At this point, we are now also joined by Oleksiy Melink, who is the co-director of Foreign Relations and International Security Programs at the Razumkov Center in Ukraine's capital, Kiev. Thanks so much for joining us. Let me begin by asking you, how is Kiev looking at Putin's call for mass mobilization? President Zelensky, while addressing the UN General Assembly, of course, has once again called for the global community to impose tougher sanctions on Russia and provide further military assistance to Ukraine. Do you really see that happening?
Yesterday's decision of President Putin to declare this partial mobilization, as well as decision to conduct a referendum on temporary occupied territories, was commented by officials and independent experts in Ukraine. But I can tell you that it was not like a breaking news throughout even a day. It's not a good news regarding the perspectives of the conflict resolution, because definitely Russia in big trouble, but Russia still have huge reserves. And even if the Russian government succeeds in gathering these 300,000 reservists, they will appear on the front line probably in terms of weeks or months, and it will complicate the situation further. But as was mentioned by Ukrainian officials, and again, many experts, that it will not change the things on the ground, because Ukraine is eager and Ukraine is willing to defend its sovereign territory, and no matter what Russia does, it will just prolong the conflict. It will produce more violence, more casualties, but it is not going to change the general course of the war.
Okay. Mr. Melink, I want to ask you this. Some experts have questioned the efficacy of sending reservists to the front lines, pointing to the retreats and slow progress by the rather well-trained Russian troops that we've seen so far in the Ukraine war. What is your view on that? Some wonder if this decision by Putin could in fact even backfire. But at the same time, President Zelensky has repeatedly reached out to Western leaders, saying the West must be more militarily involved. He's hinted repeatedly that there is a need for boots on the ground, something that the Western powers have so far steered clear of. Do you think that could change in the next phase of this war?
Just probably weeks or a couple of months ago, there was kind of this common assessment that Ukraine has enough manpower but lacks weapons, and Russia had enough weapons but was having problem with the manpower. Now I think the situation is changing, because with more and more weapons provided by our partners, Ukraine is more capable to deliver results, and we saw it during the last weeks with quite successful counteroffensive operation. I think that the time is working on the Ukrainian side, because we now have about 1 million people in uniform in the army, National Guard, territorial defense, etc., and with more weapons coming from the West, we will be able to progress even further. I don't think that the Russians, even if they create or send more people to the battlefield, they will not solve the problem of lacking equipment, because now a lot of equipment was destroyed, was out of order, and Russia has no other sources because no partners how to compensate the losses on the battleground. So we are quite optimistic. And also, I listened to your previous speaker. I think the Russians are missing one very important point, because the Russians have their problems in Ukraine, and they have problems in Ukraine. Not invited them in Ukraine. Just pull out of Ukraine, and your soldiers will be alive. There will be no problems that you are discussing now.
All right. Finally, Mr. Melink, Do you see this war significantly escalating, given this latest move by Putin? How worried is Kiev following this decision? Even though you say that your, Western friends and allies are stepping up to offer greater assistance to Ukraine, but is there a real worry of an escalation at this stage?
Definitely. We have these signs of escalation, and the President Putin's speech is actually one of the objectives was to escalate or to give these warning signals to Ukrainians, first of all, to the Western community, to make them scared with possible Russian actions, up to probably using nuclear weapons on the battlefield. And also Russia, despite all the problems with the generating effective manpower, of course, they still have a lot of instruments to create problems like man-made disasters, even on the nuclear power plant, and that definitely bother us. And but at the end of the day, as I said, Russia has lost this war from the very beginning, and just for very simple reason, because you can't do in the 21st century this kind of colonial war. They are talking about liberation, but actually this is occupation. And even if Russia declares these territories that being Russian territory, it doesn't change anything. It's still Ukrainian territory, even the Crimea Peninsula. Nobody in the world, almost nobody in the world, recognizes these territories as territories belonging to Russia.
All right, it's interesting you say the referendums won't change anything, certainly not the geopolitical reality of that region. We'll really have to wait and see how that pans out. And while you believe that Russia has been losing this war, fact of the matter is that the war is well and truly on, and at this point poised for a major escalation. On that note, Alexei Milenko, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.